Makhnitsky, the general prosecutor, filed a case against them because there was a suspicion that they were financing terrorism. But now they probably felt that they can come to an agreement with the Ukrainian courts, and now they won the case when the Russian bank can take assets of the Russian company on the Ukrainian territory. And to us it looks like a hybrid war and the annexation of Russian assets in Ukraine. So we decided, let us organize this roundtable. We invited the company, we invited the experts, we invited the Sberbank, but they did not come. First of all, I would like to mention that the topic of our roundtable is hybrid expansion of Russian business in Ukraine, realities and politics. We have the following speakers. I will start from the MP, Viktor Romaniuk, who's the MP. Also, the colleagues who work with the MPs, Yuri Zhitomirsky and Vadym. The experts are presented by Andriy Yeremenko, the founder of research company Active Group, Oleksandr Solontay, expert of the Institute of Political Education, Borys Kushniruk, chairman of the Expert-Analytical Council of the Ukrainian Analytical Center. First, Vadym Triukhan, diplomat, director of the European Movement Ukraine. Pavlo Zhovnirenko, director of the Center for Strategic Studies. Also, we expect to see here Vladimir Chepovyi, but Igor Konevsky is the editor-in-chief of business newspaper. He is present here. Sergei Boyko, expert and civil activist, and also Roman Mikhailov, Institute of International Relations, the professor. And we invited the company. We have the representative of Odeskiy Korovay, Stanislav Stepchenko, who is CEO at Odeskiy Korovay. And also we invited Oleh Ogiychuk, managing partner at Ogiychuk Law Office. And the MPs usually have the first the right to make the first speech, but we probably would like to do it differently. I will request Andriy Yeremenko. One request: we have the online broadcasting, which is broadcast to Ukraine and abroad. The simultaneous translation is provided, and the interpreters are requesting to speak slower so that we can broadcast it abroad. In this situation, there are three components. The first one is the company itself. The company wants to protect its interests. The second component is the state institution of Russian Federation. We understand that the bank is owned by Russian Federation. The bank is working in the interests of the Kremlin, and the economic interests of the Kremlin are the third or fourth priority, and the bank is doing what the Kremlin is trying to do. They annexing the Ukrainian companies, and this is Odessa region, and if 70% of the bread are not supplied to Odessa, you can imagine what may happen in Odessa. So the position of Russian bank is clear and it's logical. What is illogical for me is the position of Ukrainian court, which in the first instance satisfied the claims of Russian company, because Ukrainian court has to stand for Ukrainian interests, for law. Talking about the law, annexation of the territory is a force majeure. What are the force majeure? Could it be if not the military actions? And there are many questions to the judicial system in general and to the court. And there are many, and we can make several conclusions. First conclusion is that this is a precedent. Basically, before all these events, many companies were getting credits from Russian banks. Now, on the territory of Crimea, on the districts of Donbass, which are under the control of Russia, the businesses are either ruined or occupied or annexed, and now there are grounds to demand to pay back the loan. And now, if this is the precedent that the war is not a force majeure and they can take what they want, that means that Russians will start taking away whatever. If you were taking loans from foreign banks, the interest is to find some solution for the company to at least get the money back. That is their natural interest. And the interests of Russian banks, especially those which are owned by the leaders of the state, like Sberbank, their interests are political. And this precedent opens up very serious Pandora box, because we have so many plants in these areas, and there are dozens of thousands of companies which were getting loans, and all these companies have problems. And if the courts will start making judgments for the benefit of Russian banks, this will have a serious impact on our economy. So what's happening? The company which is robbed by the occupant, by the aggressor, because this company was either destroyed or nationalized, as they say. The National Bank of Russia puts claims not to those who seized the companies now illegally, but to the owners who were taking loans. From the point of view of Russian authorities, the Russian authorities that seized the companies, they are not guilty, but the Ukrainian side is guilty because they lost these companies. So they're robbing. They're robbing because they are destroying the companies, and they're robbing because they are trying to get back the loans. And here this is another problem. The problem to the state policy, what to do with the companies and with such loans. One problem which is very urgent, what to do with Russian banks which are annexing, and the second one is what to do with the companies that lost a lot because of these events. So basically, the state has to defend what should be the role of the state, and practically why the aircrafts that have that are making several flights, they cannot go there, and Russian banks that can block the production of bread in Odessa region, why they can block the production of bread in Odessa region. Everyone understands what is Odessa Oblast. You understand that they are trying to throw money into Bessarabia, then to Odessa, and they can block, for example, the production of bread there. And the Russian banks can do it. And the policy of the state is like that. The Russian state is doing what they were doing. They failed to do it in a military way. They are doing it using the banks. But the position of the state of Ukraine is not clear. That is it. Thank you, Andriy. The statistical information shows that this is the company which provides bread to 70% of Odessa region. Alexander, the floor is yours. Good afternoon. Oleksandr Solontay, the expert of the Institute of Political Education. I understand that, and remembering the text of Ukraine, the law of Ukraine, I understand that the law on specific features of governance does not have answers to these questions. So we need to introduce amendments to the legislation. We need to add not only the issues about militia. There's practically no people's militia under Ukrainian flags, no prosecution, no courts, no social guarantees, but there is the Ukrainian business that suffered, the companies which lost a lot, and we need to explain the situation, what to do with these assets, and also another thing is Russian companies. So basically airlines which fly to Crimea are under sanctions, and the banks do not fall under the sanctions. So I believe that we need to do a lot with the legislation. Without interfering into the legislation, we will not be able to resolve this issue. And also, I think that the reality is such that Ukraine provokes dependence on the Russian economy, and that has been happening not for the first year. And before we basically correct that situation, before we till the time we feed the Russian army, because we pay for Russian energy resources, and this money the Russia uses to finance the aggressors, the occupants. So we do not look consistent. We give money to the aggressor, and then we have to do something with the consequences of what aggressor does to our state. Basically, this is not just the reality, but also the politics. Depending on what politics we are implementing, the fruit that we harvest depend, and we harvest the fruit that we ourselves systemically are financing our aggressor, and then the aggressor has such opportunities and they have such instruments as Sberbank, whatever Bank of Russia, and we need to be very systemic and consistent here, because counteracting the expansion of Russian business, it looks like the citizens are doing more than the state. The citizens avoid buying Russian products, and Russian companies, they're repacking their goods into Ukraine. They are hiding in small letters the country producer, but that lasts like in the army when the Ukrainian citizens are taking care more of Ukrainian soldiers than the official agencies, and the same is to be done is done in the Ukrainian economy. So we need to introduce such amendments to the legislation. The state policy is to change, talking about stopping the trade with Russia. We're talking about partner number one of foreign economic activity, but it is impossible to be friends with the aggressor, shaking one hand, and the second hand kills you, cuts off your hand, your leg, takes off part of our territory. And the country should become consistent, understanding that the war is not just the state of war. The war means all the fronts. First of all, economy and money, information, and then only all these legal issues. So we live in times of war. But in legislative field, we behave as if we have normal relations with the country. We did not bring the legislation so that it corresponds to the realities where we live. So we need to work hard on that. That is why we harvest such food. I will be pleased to hear the opinion of other experts. Thank you, Alexander. For your approach, I would like to give the floor to an expert and practitioner, Borys Kushniruk. The floor is yours, Borys. For me, this story with Odessa, Korovay, Loaf group is like a synthesis of many problems that we see during the Russian aggression. And first of all, I talked to Kunitsyn, the former Prime Minister of Crimea, and I asked him the question, how many companies are taken away from Ukraine from Ukraine? He says about 500 to 600 companies. So basically, they're talking about Privatbank or Shatbank. They can go to international courts and they can try to protect their interests. What should the middle-sized and small companies do? And because they cannot defend their property in Crimea or Donbass. At the level of the state, there's no clear position on how do we defend and protect these interests. We do not have, we as a state, we could not defend our rights, our territory, our businessmen, the right of ownership. We failed to defend that and protect that at that stage, and the norms of international law were violated. And are these people in the Ministry of Justice who get information from all these companies? Does the Ministry of Justice basically act on the interests of, from the interests of all these companies to file the appeals or the claims to the international courts? And basically the state failed to cope with foreign aggression, but it has the duty to defend the rights of these companies internationally. The second issue, okay, certain companies were seized, were annexed, but some of these companies have assets in Donbass, for example, and outside of Donbass. Is there any position of the state what to do with these companies that lost their assets in Crimea or Donbass? Because they have some assets, they have some liabilities, and basically the state doesn't have a position about how should the state react to the fact that these companies in very difficult situation, they do have some they do have to pay some debts, interest on the debt, how to resolve that problem. The state does not provide any protection to these companies. These companies are just destroyed this way. Their assets were lost, were stolen in Crimea or in Donbass, but then they are further destroyed on the territory of Ukraine. And also the tax bodies do not pay attention that the company cannot operate to a full extent. There's no state position to that, and the law, if this situation took place, then we need to maybe there should be some moratorium set on paying taxes. The task is, if the state fails to protect the interests of the business by military means, they need to protect them economically. But what is also happening in courts, basically, is there, from the point of view of Ukrainian international law, the notion of force majeure in conditions when some territories were annexed. For me, it's obvious that this is a force majeure. In all the agreements between, for example, two physical persons or physical person and legal entity, there's always a section about force majeure, which says that in case of the force majeure, the liabilities are suspended till the situation of the force majeure stops. But do we understand, do we define such cases as force majeure? For example, if our judicial system doesn't understand what force majeure means as a term, we need to explain that this is a force majeure which has to suspend certain commitments and liabilities. And now, talking about Odessa, Korovay, we have the situation of absurdity. There are the assets which were taken away, which were seized in Crimea. They were just seized. They just seized because they say we wanted that. And after that, the Russian bank, the state Russian bank, can take the assets on the territory of Ukraine because what was used as a collateral was were the assets in Crimea and on the territory of Ukraine. So first we take it over there, and then we take it here on the territory of Ukraine. So it's not just about, even if it were the Ukrainian bank, but once it's happening with the involvement of Russian bank and Russian capital, then I believe that there should be some moratorium imposed on certain things. I'm not talking about emotions, but formally these things are to be prohibited. And one more thing that I wanted to tell. Some time ago, I introduced some proposals there is a notion of strategic industries. It is obvious that there should be two limitations to allow investments into the strategy sectors. Basically, the investors cannot be the companies where the final beneficiaries are not established, are not defined. Offshores cannot be basically, maybe Ukraine is just used for money laundering, the money which is earned on corruption, drugs, and smuggling, but also other countries cannot be owners of the companies which come to Ukraine to the strategy sectors. And it's not just about banking sector, but the banking sector is especially sensitive to that, to the bank system of Ukraine. The large banks come where there is a foreign capital. Then in this case, there might be the situation when in the strategic sector of Ukraine we have an influence of a different state, and that does not depend which sector it is. So this example with how the state-owned Russian bank, it's a state-owned bank, talking about control. And this is the bank of the state of Russia, and now they can make steps that can lead to bankruptcy of such companies. It's obvious that this is a big risk. In the end, I would like to mention everyone knows that it all started from some trifle. The grain was not brought to St. Petersburg because there was a very big snow and the capital was blocked, and in the result in St. Petersburg there was a big problem with the supply of bread. So if the activity of Odessa, Korovay is blocked and they supply bread to a large territory of Ukraine, maybe is the chance for Russia to further destabilize the situation on this territory. So basically, this is very serious. This is at the level of the state position. What should the state do? Because it is important to protect the national interests on their territory. Really, this is a strategic sphere and strategical issue of economic and diplomatic war. I would like to give the floor to the representative of the company. Stanislav Stepchenko is the CEO of the Odessa Korovay. So what's happening there? Esteemed colleagues, it was very simple. We got a loan to buy Crimean companies to expand our business. We bought assets in Crimea for money we received from Sberbank, the Simferopolsky plant or factory of bread products, and another one. We were paying back the loan till January or February this year, basically. Further, because Crimean actives started generating certain profit, we believed that these assets can pay back their loans themselves. We were inviting the companies from Crimea. We were sending all these information to them 2 or 3 weeks in advance, and basically the Crimean company had to pay back the loan. What we did not expect that there will be some, I don't know, the order issued by Crimean government or whatever they're called about nationalization of our 2 joint stock companies. Our joint stock companies, where we are the majority shareholders, they have become Crimean, and they are the companies which are now owned by Crimean government or whatever. We cannot even go to the court on the territory of Russian Federation, because our joint stock company cannot get re-registered in Crimea for about 8 months. We are refused to get registered. The certain decision was made at the shareholders meeting, and they refuse us to get re-registered. According to international law, we can go to the court, but who will give the guarantee that Russian Federation will execute the ruling of the international court? They have never been executing their rulings. So we are in such a situation, because one of the parties, let's go back to the situation, what's happening in Ukraine. One of our companies went to one of the regional district courts of Odessa region, Kiev district court of Odessa region. Our company won the first instance court, and these contracts about change of the pay of the debt were recognized as correct, but then 2-3 months later, Sberbank made the decision that they took Crimean companies from us. Why not take Odessa companies? Why should they pay in Russian Federation to Russian bank if they can take Odessa companies? And they went to the Court of Appeal of Odessa region. The Court of Appeal of Odessa region passed a very interesting and we believe not very legal ruling. They were not even considering this claim. They said that this dispute cannot be considered by a local court, go to commercial court. So that's what they did. Then they went to the commercial court of Kiev district to recognize this contract about moving the debt to Crimean companies void. They were not present during the signing of additional contract. They were not informed. They said even though we were informing them that the Sberbank of Russia signed this note of receiving our notifications, but that means that they disagree. To say that they disagree after half a year, after we stopped paying the loan, after, according to the law, according to this contract, Krymkhleb had to pay the loan. They just started recognizing these contracts void. We lost the first instance. We submitted the appeal. A month ago, the Court of Appeal of Kiev district passed the ruling which supported the first instance. Now we submitted the cassation appeal, and I believe that during the next month they will be considering this case. I can say the same as I was saying in Odessa. We believe in our justice. This is not irony. We do believe it, and based on some information that I received from the assistants to judges, I know that there was a big pressure on the court from the heads of our Ukrainian services agencies, and I do not understand what is the position of our government and of our state in this situation. We cannot understand why Ukrainian company now has become like a boy forbidding in this not very easy game. Now in our company I have about 1,500 people working, 1,500 families. I have one example in Dnipropetrovsk region. I will not name Russian bank and the company which suffered. That was a settlement where there were 3,000 houses where 400 people were working in the company. And half a year ago, our law enforcement bodies and with the support of our law enforcement bodies, the Russian bank took this company. So all this, the company is now dead, and all these people, they are unemployed. We are not ready to give up. We are not ready to sacrifice 1,500 people. We have, we are producing 67% of bread on the territory of Odessa region. We are not ready to give away these people, to lose these employees, so we'll be using all the methods of fighting, legal methods of fighting. If the legislator would say that we are the strategic company for this region, and the bank, which has 52% of shares owned by Central Bank of Russia, cannot take that company, cannot control the bread in Odessa region, then it would have been easier. From the political point of view, it would have been much easier. So this is a brief story. Thank you. Thank you, Stanislav. This is a sad story. And this is the question to the state, to authorities. All the details, especially taking into account all these details. But there's one very serious legal thing. You say that you believe in our legal system. I would like to request the lawyer to assess the situation from the legal point of view. What's happening with our courts? Now, our situation is very complicated because we have this undeclared war going on. We are sort of building the state of law, but we also need to think about sovereignty and the security. If we look back into the history, when one state would occupy another state, they would block all the issues related to supply of food products, and that would cause starvation, and such a state would collapse. In this situation, we see that the annexation, by annexation, Russia cannot seize Ukraine, cannot defeat Ukraine, but there are many mechanisms which help them do it from the inside. We see that the crediting systems is such that the company was taking a loan and the company was paying it. The businesses, this loan was taken to develop the businesses, and the businesses have to support themselves. Now the situation is that the Crimea was annexed, the companies are seized by Russia, and Ukrainian side has to pay the loan which it took from Russia. So the companies cannot pay what they don't have, and the companies which are in Crimea are feeding now Russia, and our side has to pay for ourselves and for Russia. So where does the state look? This is very important issue, because there are hundreds of such companies, and we see that the scheme is developed when the property will be transferred to Russian Federation via courts, via judicial system. We see that many banks were ruined, and all these loans are bought by Russian banks, and the Russian banks has to demand the property which Ukrainian companies have. So we see the hidden annexation of the economy of Ukraine. This way, if with the assistance of banking system and judicial system of Ukraine, if we help this scheme, then I'm afraid that in a month, in 2 or 3, we will see that our property is not owned by Ukraine, and basically this all will be annexed from us. And I believe that we need to take all these things to the Verkhovna Rada, and we need to do something so that our property remains on the territory of Ukraine, so that this cannot be annexed by banks with the assistance of judicial system of Ukraine. Thank you, Oleg, because you touched upon referring to the legislator. I would like to give the floor to MP Viktor Markniak. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. It was a pleasure to hear the opinion of the experts. I would like to explain this situation. First, by the presidential decree, the sanctions were introduced in Le Monde. There is an article which assesses the situation of Ukraine, and everyone was surprised why, after 1.5 years of war, we have woken up and are starting to influence the situation. The civilized world is surprised because the sanctions were introduced by the US, Japan 1.5 years ago. That was adequate reaction to these events. We were sleeping for 1.5 years, and we get the result, which for the business, the general position of the state machine is like in old Soviet times. The main thing is to declare and do nothing. In the legislation, this is settled in such a way that it doesn't touch upon any private interest. Second, we have the practice working with Russian companies within deputies' control. Everyone's talking about Transera, but no one recollects Patriot and Masan. These are two companies which are owned by residents of Russia. In a year, we did not take out of Ukraine from 5 to 7 billion hryvnias. This is 1% of the budget of Ukraine, and no one noticed that. These are huge figures for our state, 5 times. We could not include them into the list of sanctions, only thanks to the principal position of the group of MPs of the security service and external intelligence. We managed to do that. That is about how the state machine is reacting to the events happening in Ukraine. Third thing, I was the chairman of the organization, Union of Labor Collectives Against Raiders. What we have now, to rely on the judicial system wouldn't be right now. I quote figures and facts. Let's take the east of Ukraine, Crimea. 90% of militiamen, 70% of prosecutors, and 20% of judges are traitors. These are people who switch to enemy's side, and the state machine has not issued any sentence, any ruling against that. This is demonstration of how the state apparatus reacts. Second, let's take the commercial court of Ukraine. The people from times of Yanukovych are still there, starting from Techkov down to Artur Yemelyanov, the Service of Fiscal Investigation. Just in Liechtenstein, 70 million euros were blocked on the account of his wife. You can imagine the scale of raidership and robbing in these agencies. The judicial system today is the system of corruption, which has been in existence for 24 years. Prosecutors and judicial mafia were the only reason of the destroying Ukraine. These people are still there, and they continue to ruin Ukraine. One of the presidents of the US once said that what is beneficial to Ford is beneficial to America. We need to defend the interests of specific business, because business creates the jobs. They represent the interests of Ukraine. They are mostly interested in the project Ukraine to exist, not the civil servants. The civil servants, I told you, 97, 80, 20% are traitors. So first of all, we need to try to regulate that in legislative field. Then we need to raise it in public sector, among the civil sector, because you see that Russian capital has this fifth column in Ukraine. We have the examples, very specific examples, when we were introducing companies into, trying to introduce companies into the sanction list. We know who these people are. They are talking in different TV shows how the interests of Ukraine are to be protected, but in fact they were not allowing us to introduce these companies into sanction lists. Also, we need to talk to people who can make decisions, who can influence, because the people were taken off the property. First, give us back the property, and then we'll sit and talk about money with you. The scheme is very simple. Thank you. The only request to you is don't call Ukraine the project, call it the motherland, the state. Also, the colleague from Deputies Association, Deputies Control, please say something. I have a request. We need to leave that room at 11:45. So Vadym Triukhan, the chairman of the secretariat of the group of Deputies Control. In a couple of words about Deputies Control. Interfaction Association was a group set up on the symbolic day of fighting against corruption. It has 23 MPs from 5 factions. The main objective is fighting corruption. That's what we are doing for more than 9 months. We have some results. Some of the civil servants were fired. There are dozens of criminal cases filed. As to this situation here, we are here to understand how much this case is just a single case or is it a system. If this is a system, then to what extent this is economics or politics. Depending on what we find out in this situation, we will have to make a decision about how to resolve this problem. The deputy's control has always been defending the interests of Ukrainian business, so we, with our colleagues, will do all we can so that Odessa loaf, Odessa chleb is Odessa chleb, Odessa Korovay is Odessa Korovay. So basically this is a Ukrainian Odessa company. Yuri Zhitomirsky, the esteemed participants of the roundtable, the secretariat of the interfactional association deputies control, before they made a decision to participate in this event or not, examine the information about Odessa Korovay. I would like to say Odessa Korovay is a unique company which produces Ukrainian bread from Ukrainian grain, and Ukrainians are eating it. And one of the participants of the roundtable has correctly reminded us about the lessons of February Revolution. It is enough to limit the food products and to have a social outburst, because Odessa Korovay is operating mostly in Odessa region and supplies 76% of bread to this region. This issue goes to political level. We have many representatives of mass media here. Almost every week we learn about some negative things in this region. We learn about some explosions and about just real explosions and social outbursts. So the task of the government is not to allow social outbursts in problematic region and to defend, to protect Ukrainian company which is producing bread for Ukrainians. From the point of view of deputatsky control, in the result of the roundtable, we will examine this issue. Additionally, all the MPs of Ukraine, all the representatives of different factions and non-factions MPs will be informed about the situation, and we will be sending the deputies' requests. Second thing I wanted to mention today at the roundtable, we have the experts and lawyers who clearly described their position, and we agree with that we need to introduce some we need some legislative initiatives to protect Ukrainian business from raidership. Please come to us. Let's work together. Let's work together. I see that you are experts and you also want to participate in this work. Our doors open. That is it, and I would like to say, in the words of Taras Shevchenko, fight and you will overcome and you will win. Let God help you. And this is a very specific proposal to the company, and so thank you for this initiative, and we hope that it will have a positive result for Ukraine, for Odessa Korovay company. The next one is Volodymyr Chepovyi, the president of Ukrainian Business Association. Good afternoon. What can I say? We, together with business newspaper, travel all over the country. We talk to business. The worst thing is This is not, the worst thing is that this is not the single case. It's all disguised as technological leadership. It's all disguised technological leadership operation that happens in Odessa region and other regions, and that is done on the territory of Ukraine by Russian banks. And first thing we need to say, this shouldn't be just the issue for business and civil society. This is the issue of the security of the state. Because thank God that the president, when he was talking at the UN, he was not saying ATO, he was talking about war and aggression of Russia. Maybe when he's back, we will be very open. When it is aggression, we'll be saying aggression. If it is war, we'll be saying it is war. If it is leadership, then this is leadership with the assistance of different schemes, and it's very dangerous for the state. And the proposal is basically the business newspaper wrote about that case and other cases. We first thought that these are some single cases, but that is the technology which started working. They have success, and that is why they do it everywhere where the companies were cooperating with Russian banks. So we need to get united because the experience of small victory can lead to systemic victory, and we will cooperate with all the branches of power, and this would be probably all who take care of the security of the country. This is a new front line. We need to openly say that they stopped firing, but they're now using different technologies. We are ready to participate, to coordinate actions, to write about all these cases. There's a lot of work. I remember that I would like to thank you for this term, economic front line. Now, Pavlo Zhovnirenko, the Center for Strategic Studies, director of the center. Are Russian companies in Ukraine the interests of economic expansion of Russia to Ukraine? Yes, they are, but they are also the source of financing of the war with Ukraine. And besides what was said about energy, that Ukrainian citizens are sponsoring aggressor, there are many other companies, MTS or Kyivstar, paying these accounts. We are also financing the Russian army. And answering the question, is there the state policy of Russia against Ukraine? Yes, there is. Marx 200 years ago said that big capital is international in its nature. And that is normal for big capital, because international borders are evil for the big capital. But when super big capital comes into political power, then politics becomes business for them, because international and national are opposite in content words. The national interest becomes the enemy, in fact. All these anti-state things taking place in Ukraine, the society is trying to fight against that, to say nothing about volunteers, when the state institutions are dead, when the leaders do not care, the society starts acting. The civil control is good and it acts in the developed democratic societies. The key words there are transparency. As soon as they find some act of corruption or bribery, they make it public and the person resigns because the person understands that this is the end for the career. When we make it public, it doesn't mean anything. After it's made public, even mass media, when they make it public, even after that, well, basically the situation shows that we need a lot of pressure from civil society. Sometimes even physical pressure is needed to execute the ruling of the court, if there is a ruling of the court. And if we are now talking about this situation with Odessa loaf, Korovay, Odessa Korovay. So I understand that in Odessa, well, Russia is preparing the hunger strike in Odessa. But the whole situation is not the problem of Russia. It's the problem of our leadership of the state. And the small problem that we are talking about. And these problems will be resolved only when the internal fighting between two personalities stops, between the president of Ukraine and the president of Russian Corporation. When this fighting stops, who will win, politician or businessman? I do hope that politician will win. Besides the civil society control, we will have the pressure of the civil society control, we will get the pressure of the members of parliament. Now, Vadym Triukhan, diplomat, director of the European Movement Ukraine. I thought that we will be talking about systemic things, but we are now advertising Hromadski control, and I will say a couple of words about Salute Day. This situation shows how vulnerable we are. There are two problems, internal and external. What is the internal problem? The state doesn't care how small and medium-sized business survives. I understand that Odessa Korovay is a medium-sized business, and you can feel that you have nowhere to go. And basically, it's not as an advertisement, but what our politicians lack. Our political parties have to pay more attention to small and medium-sized business. They have to create such rules of game that will allow such companies not just to survive, but to develop. How can our state protect such companies? Very easily. They can change legislation. They should be on the side of our companies. Why it is difficult? It's what Zhovnirenko was saying, that our heads of the state are all the time fighting between the state interest and private interest, right? And I believe that we need to reach 3 levels of power. We need to talk to the president, to the governor, Saakashvili, who says that he is a person who fights for Odessa businessmen, I did not hear anything from him about this threat in Odessa, because Odessa Korovay is basically seized. And third, the issue of the diplomatic issue. I remember 2003 when we found out that one Arabic company, Egyptian company, uh, organized some scheme. They bribed our judges so that they confiscate the aircraft, one aircraft, and our customs brokers confiscated this aircraft. Then they went to the Supreme Court, they gave money to everyone, and then they arrested in their airports, they arrested some great aircrafts, Ukrainian aircrafts in their airports. And when we saw that, we were surprised how easily it is to deceive our state. And then we found great lawyers in Egypt and in European countries. And basically we won the court procedure. It is important for you to give this information to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Justice, because this is the situation which is not just Ukrainian, but the situation which is about external affairs. I believe that we need to talk not only about Ukrainian lawyers, but foreign lawyers also. What is the position of the West? I was shocked. Russia believes that Vladimir Putin went there, and Russia is now in a big game. Russia showed who is who, and they say that this is like another Kuskina match, what Khrushchev did in the UN, and the whole world says, what was it? Putin arrived, he had the meeting only with Obama, and he went back but Russia is not planning to give up. Putin did not give any positive message to New York. There was not a single constructive idea expressed by him. So we need to understand that Russia will not give up. And then there is another element in this hybrid war. The Russian banks will not just be trying to get such companies as yours, but I believe that we in Ukraine, and the MPs have to pay attention to that. We shouldn't expect that the West will defend, will protect us. Oleksandr Solontay was saying that we need to amend legislation, but we need to be ready for a big war of legal war with Russia. And the West will try to not to interfere into this conflict, because Russia is an important partner. And this will lead to one thing: we ourselves will have to fight for our companies. But there is one positive thing here. So the West is the country which is based on rules, and if our system doesn't allow you to win this case, then you have to go further. There is the European Court on Human Rights. I disagree with the MP. You will need to go to foreign courts against the assets that you have in Russia. The UK's case shows that absolutely the foreign judicial systems do not care whether Putin is in power or not. They follow the procedure. In your case, even though this will be a long process, but I believe that you need to start forming the pool of lawyers. We can discuss it later. You will win the case. And one more thing, talking about the pressure of civil society. We do have the situation when only that it's not a political part that the pressure of civil society is not sufficient. We need to work with the state, you need to work with lawyers and also with activists. And I'm sure that you will win. And I think that we need to be ready that there will be dozens and hundreds of such cases, and MPs who are in the parliament, they need to think about that, and they need to urgently address two issues: the strategy of returning Crimea and the strategy of restoring statehoodness in Donbass, and the issues related to how to protect our assets which are stolen by the rider, which is Russian Federation. Thank you, Vadym, for interesting ideas, and Roman Mikhailov. Very briefly, so that we give the chance to journalists to ask questions. What I saw, I will not repeat. Mr. Stepchenko, I respect people who create jobs, who provide food to Odessa region and other regions of Ukraine. The statistical information and what Vladimir said, this is not a single case. The solution should be systemic. I am sorry that our state is not acting in advance. The Russia has created the Ministry on Crimea. We don't have an agency that would be able to forecast such situations. Where's the governor of Odessa region? You need to go to them, but because we do have such communication, that means that the state doesn't have the mechanism of preventing such situations. The state hasn't turned its face to people. Our task is to do what we can for the state to turn their face to people. They need to start working and help those people who create jobs. And how many companies cannot go to international courts? There are hundreds of them. And Stanislav mentioned there are cases of closing companies. The systemic changes are to lead to we need to learn how to forecast the situations, and we need to fight the foreign aggressor in all the fronts. Thank you, Sergei Boyko. I absolutely agree that this is not a single case, this is another front of hybrid war. But as to systemic, to resolve this system, we need to find the reasons of the problem in Ukraine. And there could be just three ways, three things. First of all, that's criminal incompetence of the leadership.
Друге, можливий варіант – це злий умисел.
And then maybe this is done on purpose. I don't the most probable reason of such situation is very skillful use by Russia of our problems. The attempt of the leadership of Ukraine to preserve the system, to further steal the values from the state. So I suggest that the next step for experts should be to get together to define the reason of that situation and how can we overcome that reason. Basically, we have 5 minutes left only. So now questions and answers. Business Weekly. You basically showed the problem. You said that to address the problem, coordination is needed. Who should coordinate? So that Parliament, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, believe with them. Who should be the coordinator? My experience in several cases. It's well, the cases of Egypt and MH17. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs should be coordinating such things, but the problem is that people there are not motivated. The leadership is very weak. I am not sure that they can cope with that. But the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the diplomats are to be coordinating this thing. From the point of view of a person who has 7 years of law practice, we were protecting people from similar attacks. If someone in Ukraine believes that the state institutions may help, no. We have examples of 2 victories of Maidan, the war in the east. Where was the state efficient? It's not efficient. It's an old Soviet model. It's dying. It's just the issue of timing. I am now talking as a lawyer. The coordination of any activity should be taken by a person who's mostly interested. In this case, this is the business. In the state, we previously had the commission under the cabinet of ministries, which was fighting the raidership. Now this commission is not functioning. I believe that such commission should be renewed. At least that was a platform where we could discuss it, could make the thing public. Now we don't have such a platform in the state. It's just like in Maidan. It's just those who... I believe that we will sit together later. We are a very young organization to take all the responsibility. We were developing the technologies. Now we are testing the technology, the system of collective security for small and medium-sized business. We have the solution, but don't have the resources. But possibly we will do it together with the large, and will the system of collective security for small and medium-sized business. Yes, we will get involved together with mass media, with business newspaper. Okay. The next question, and this will be I have 2 small questions. Reporter magazine. The question to Stanislav. Did you address local authorities? Did you talk to Mikhail Saakashvili? Does Mikhail Saakashvili know about your problem? If not, then why? I understand that Ukrainian courts do not put obstacles to taking correct ruling. Maybe I will answer the first question. A year and a half ago, there was the event in Odessa, and the citizens organized the event near one of the Sberbanks of Russia. We signed the collective submission to Mr. Saakashvili. We have not heard anything from Saakashvili. We will accept his assistance. Everyone understands it. But we have not heard from him. We did not write anything from our company to local authorities. Well, the second question, if we do not understand who has ordered that, but now we see more of economic merger, economic basically leadership. For what purposes? I believe everyone can guess. If 70% of bread disappears, only the bread, then the supply could be restored not earlier than in 4 months. The last question. We need to leave. RTI channel. How big is the share of Russian capital in Ukrainian business? Is it realistic for Ukraine to refuse from Russian banks? Talking about banks. With banks, the situation is of paradox. I am for liquidating the national bank as the institution because it failed to make the national currency stable. Talking about capital, I believe the share of Russian capital is from 7 to 20%. It's not critical, but it's not little. But nothing prohibits the leaders of the national bank to find investors in other countries of the world and to replace Russian capital here. 2 words about Russian banks. One of the state banks in Crimea, we lost Shatbank, and it's about 10 billion that the state lost. Why now, having the state bank of Russia on the territory of Ukraine, we do not submit any claims against them? We do nothing as a state. I don't know why. Talking about Russian capital and Russian banks, in July, the only commission that paid attention to that was the National Commission on Securities, and it deprived all Russian banks their license. Why the National Bank is not looking at that? Sorry, you have 30 seconds. That was the assessment of not Ukrainian mass media, but French colleagues. Le Monde. Why don't we do anything for a year and a half to defend our state interests? The state suffered so big losses in Crimea, and we allow the occupant to conduct business on our territory. That is the assessment of the situation. Colleagues, the topic is very difficult. We had some optimistic statements. We believe that the parliament will be able to influence that situation, and that's maybe that there should be the proposal sent or the paper sent to the governor and to the president of the country. So let us hope that this problem with the Odessa Korovay will be resolved quickly to the benefit of Ukrainian business, of Ukrainian economy and Ukrainian people. Thank you all. Dear journalists,